You know, you might not think a local pawnbroker has anything to do with your concert tickets or your food delivery fees, but you'd be surprised. Today, we're going to dive into a legal case about a huge, unexpected tax bill that went all the way to Europe's highest court. And its ripple effects? Well, they impact businesses everywhere.
Okay, let's start with this number, 308,543 euros and 85 cents. This is what sparked a legal battle that lasted more than a decade. It's the size of a surprise tax bill that one Portuguese pawnbroker received, a bill so big they were willing to fight it all the way to the top.
So, the company at the center of all this is called Companhia União de Crédito Popular. Now, their main gig is pretty straightforward. They grant loans and people pledge items as collateral. Under EU law, that core service, the actual granting of credit, is exempt from value-added tax, or VAT. Seems simple enough, right?
Well, it wasn't that simple. See, the problem started when a borrower couldn't pay back their loan. If that happened after 3 months, the pawnbroker had the right to auction off the pledged item to recover their money. And when they did that, they took an 11% sales commission from the auction price. And that commission, that's what caught the eye of the tax auditors. They argued that commissions should have been taxed all along.
And this disagreement set the stage for a fundamental legal riddle, one that, believe it or not, would take over a decade to finally solve. And here's the question the entire thing boils down to. Is that auction just the final unfortunate step of one single VAT-exempt loan, or is it a completely different, separate service that ought to be taxed like anything else? The whole case and that $300,000 bill, it all hinged on the answer to this. So you had two totally opposing views. On one side, the pawnbroker said, hey, this is all part of one single service, granting credit. The auction is just how the process ends sometimes, so the commission should be tax-exempt too. But the tax authority came back and said, nope, not so fast. You're providing two services here, a tax-exempt loan and a taxable auction. That 11% commission, that's for the auction, and you owe us tax on it. So to figure this out, the courts had to use a specific legal idea called an ancillary service. A service is ancillary if it's not really what the customer wants for its own sake, but it's just a way to better enjoy the main thing they're buying. Think about it like this. Is the free Wi-Fi at a hotel a separate service you're buying, or is it just ancillary to enjoying your hotel room? That's the kind of logic they had to apply. And trust me, this was no quick fight. The pawnbroker battled this thing for over a decade. They went through multiple Portuguese courts, faced dismissals, and just kept appealing, all the way up to Portugal's Supreme Administrative Court. But even they weren't sure how to interpret the EU law here, so they kicked the question up to the highest authority, the European Court of Justice. So, after all those years, all those appeals, what was the answer? The European Court of Justice, the ECJ, was finally ready to make a ruling. And the court's decision was decisive. It sided completely with the tax authority. The verdict? The loan and the auction are two distinct independent services. That means the auction was not ancillary to the loan, and that commission was absolutely subject to VAT. And they didn't just give a verdict and walk away. They laid out their reasoning in 4 key points. First, the services are independent. Someone else could have run the auction. Second, an auction isn't the normal way a loan ends. It only happens when something goes wrong. Third, the auction is an end in itself. It has its own purpose. It's not just there to make the loan better. And finally, and this is a big one, the court said tax exemptions are special exceptions, and you have to interpret them very, very strictly. The final judgment itself left zero room for doubt. It states that sales by auction are, quote, not ancillary to the granting of credit. And just like that, for the pawnbroker, the case was closed. Okay, so a pawnbroker in Portugal has to pay a big tax bill. Why should the rest of us care? Well, it turns out the logic behind this ruling has massive implications for a whole range of other industries. What this case really does is hammer home a core principle of tax law. Paying tax is the default setting. Exemptions are the rare exception, and they will always be interpreted narrowly. You can't just bundle a taxable service with a tax-free one and hope the tax liability just disappears. So the takeaway for any business out there that bundles services, whether you're in finance, insurance, real estate, you name it, is pretty clear. This is a wake-up call. You have to look at the economic reality of what you're providing. Is it truly one indivisible service, or is it separate parts packaged together? Because as this pawnbroker found out the hard way, getting that wrong can be a very, very expensive mistake. And that leaves us with a final thought. This ruling really forces you to look at everyday transactions in a new light. Think about that. Mandatory service fee on a concert ticket, or the delivery charge on your dinner order. Are they really just part of one service? Or are they two? As this case proves, for the tax authorities, that distinction is anything but trivial.